Hey, this is Tom Donnie from the Saab Heritage Car Museum, USA, and today I want to show you a car, talk about it a little bit. This car was actually driven by RayK Saab of Albany, Oregon to Albany, New York for the 2021 Saab Owners Convention. That's over 6,000 miles. I think he said with side trips and stuff, I think he had 7,000 plus miles on it for that trip. Pretty amazing for a vintage Saab two-stroke, especially when you consider, Ray went both ways. It was a round trip. And Ray is not a technician type guy. He'll admit it quickly that he's not real good at working on cars. So most of the work, prep work, was done by John Collins out west. And John did a tremendous job prepping this car for the trip and the other 25,000 plus miles that Ray put on it since his engine rebuild. And what was going to happen was Ray was going to drive the car to the 2022 Owners Convention that was held here in Sturgis and donate the car in person at the convention on banquet night. Unfortunately, the engine went out on his way to the 2022 convention, so the car and Ray did not make it. So I kind of want to look at this engine today. This is kind of a two-part video, one to thank Ray and Pat for their generous donation, but the other to look at the engine and just kind of see what happened here. We don't know exactly what went on as far as why it failed. We know what happened for sure. It had a needle bearing go out and destroyed a front piston. And these are the wrist pin needle bearings. These are really rare to go out. It's just very unusual to see that happen. Today, this engine, back up a bit. So the engine we're rebuilding today has our new connecting rods, new pistons. But this engine was rebuilt probably 2005, 2016, just before we started making our own kits. Now, again, we make our own rods. We make a special low-end bearing that gets rid of this cage, and that goes to an upgraded modern snowmobile jet ski two-stroke setup. And then we use these specially designed silver-coated bearings that take the place of the original bearing. And this one I had sourced aftermarket bearings and put in. At the time, both David Bauer and I were trying to figure out solutions for parts because custom making your stuff is very expensive, so we're trying to use off-shelf stuff. And I told Ray there's no way I would have put one of these bearing setups in here in a customer's car, and kind of said whoever built the engine, which was John Collins, that John must have used some off-shelf bearings and they weren't high enough quality or something happened. We also see a lot of heat going on here, and don't know what was going on there. We can tell that these pins were fitted nice and good because they'll fall through under their own weight, which is what you want. You don't want a tight fit there at all. I know the Saab manual says push it with your thumb, but that's too much pressure. So I don't know what caused the heat, what caused the failure on this one. Once it failed, it then tore up the cage. And there's the pieces of the cage. And then, of course, the rest is chewed up into piston. And that is pretty impressive, I must say, because there's actually chunks of bearing embedded. And it shows you how tough those pistons are. One little crack right there. And I think I did that actually taking it apart because it was seized up and had to beat it out. Anyway, I told Ray, I said, there's no way I would have used these bearings because I had lots of OEMs and we had not yet developed our new rod kit. And lo and behold, I told Ray I'd go back and look through my notes because I do keep really good notes. I'll keep a build sheet on all the engines I do. There's the sheet for Ray's. But we did some mild porting to the block too because he's got an expansion chamber on. It's a single carb. And we're going to give it a little bit more juice. So we got it ported up a bit. We're going to mill the head, have a little fun. But I went back to my notes in Iowa and dug through them in my book and found Ray's crankshaft rebuild, which I did back in, I think, 2015. And sure enough, one time and one time only, it does show in my notes, I fitted bearings and sent them with it for the wrist pins, which is something I never do. At the time, again, we were trying, both David Bauer and I were trying to source parts and figure out how we could keep these things to, live longer. And I had bought a rod hone equipment. So I was actually honing out rods and then using different bearings, trying different stuff. And I didn't think I did it on the customers, and I did. So this one only made it 25,000. Of course, the one car you do an semi-experimental piece in, and by the way, Dave was using non-SKFs just like this, only not as high quality as the SKF is, but obviously this one failed for some reason. So we know they work, it didn't work long enough. You know, the one guy that drives 25,000 miles got the part that didn't last. So whether it got a little short on oil one time, which I kind of doubt because I don't see evidence of that anywhere else. You know, you'd think you'd see something on the pistons, which we don't. Did it get overheated one time? I don't know. Or is it just these bearings were a real bad match? Regardless, today we've got these and we're using them. And this was the only one I did. I mean, here's a sample. I think Bud Clark was making these. These are brass, big, heavy suckers, because these cages were breaking, these aluminum cages. And again, everyone that was building them, me and Bud, David, we're trying to figure out what we can do to make these things last longer. So today we've got the upgraded rod kits with the upgraded bearings. Everything's going real good, and been a great combination with the pistons and so forth. So anyway, we're going to get this back running. We're going to stuff this puppy together and get the block painted up, and get it in the car, and hopefully get Ray's car running again. So again, special thanks to Ray and Pat for donating the car to the museum, and hopefully we'll get it running here before too long. And you can come to the museum and want to go for a ride. I think this would be the car to go for a ride in, because I know Ray really enjoyed giving people rides in the cars and showing off his car, and he was very proud of his accomplishment going to Oregon. And I have to say, that's the biggest trip I've ever heard of in a vintage Saab. Obviously people did it back in the day when they were new, but to do it today with an old 65, 66 two-stroke RayK, that's pretty freaking amazing. So again, Ray and Pat, thank you so much for your donation, and my honor to get her back on the road for you, running good. All right, take care, guys. It's Tom Donnie from Sturgis, South Dakota, signing off.